Okay. And so we've got Paul, and we'll break for lunch after Paul's done, and then Paul's going to talk about his university students, and then Sarah's going to talk about working with the high school students.
All right. So again, I'll keep this shorter since I know a number of you have actually seen or heard some of this background before, but since some of you haven't, I'll kind of go through some of this. One of the things to keep in mind with regard to university students, which is most of what I'm working with, is that it's more diverse than you might think at first. So in other words, I think the implication, since I'm directing environmental studies program, a lot of the students I deal with are scientists, is that there's a high skill level coming in. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. And this is just kind of a rough breakdown of the students I'm working with. So one is I am also the advisor for the environmental club, and that's any kind of student. So that could be a management student, that could be a recreation tourism major, it could be anybody. So they may have very little science background at all. Up to and including folks like Chris, who's now graduated, who are student researchers and even master's graduate students, and everything in between. So it's quite a broad cross-section. And for me, the Mayfly stations actually worked out really well for this, because at the introductory group, and this is actually just a group of the environmental club that is working with a number of professionals in the field. They're doing electrofishing in this particular picture. But if you think about the basic thing you need with the Mayfly station, we're talking about is keeping them clean. I talk about my high-tech stuff. I get out there with a scrub brush, you know. Well, that's something that you can do. You don't need a whole lot of training to do that. And to help out when we're doing things like discharge measurement, there's a lot of things that they can do. And so those things are there, and it allows them to get engaged. And let's face it, nobody really wants to do meetings, even though we're here. And so for the environmental club, a lot of it is actually giving them stuff to do. And so that's one of the things that can end up happening. But it also, the end of this gives us, and you recognize some of these folks, gets us good data at the end of it. So that it's actually useful. And so we have a number, as I said, we move on up. We've got research students. I'll talk about Cherry Creek in just a moment. So it was Krista in this past year and Kristen Roth, one of her comrades, who were working on Cherry Creek and also on the Aquashikala and using the Mayfly stations as basically part of their research project. I've got two newer students that are working, Levi Morris, who's also got an MWA association, and Ben Laubach, who are working on two other creeks on the Broadhead and Paradise Creek. And they're specifically using the stations. And so having students doing that research, they're getting more value out of it, but it also means that they're engaged in actually making sure that particular station is, so Ben and Levi are going out weekly now to make sure that they're actually pulling, because these don't, Broadhead and Paradise don't broadcast. So they're pulling the cards every week, you know, to get their data every week. They're going out there cleaning them, maintaining them, and doing it every single week. We're going to work more on TSS, for example, on those stations. And so that's a resource that's there as well. And I'm working it more and more into stream ecology class. So there'll be specific labs that are oriented around it as well. Just wanted to touch, since most of you have seen all of that, this is actually a number of the focal areas for the Pocono-Kittatinny cluster, of which I'm a part within the DRWI. And so this is, we're just talking about Broadhead Creek and Paradise Creek. Both of these actually have Mayfly stations at the base of them, right before the confluence of the two creeks coming together. So those are some nice sites. But we've got a number that are on Cherry Creek, and it is less than 10 minutes from campus. Cherry is kind of cool because it is a mosaic of land uses. It's got a lot of historical ag use in there. It's got some areas that are really well preserved. It had a bunch of golf courses, and a lot of it's being converted. So the site that you saw before was an old golf course that's part of the Cherry Valley National Wildlife Refuge. This is the Spence property, which actually is pretty nice, actually right along the creek itself. The upland area is an old farm that's now going to be planted in warm grasses and other things as well. But right around the creek isn't too bad. It's a mix of low gradient and high gradient, unlike most of the Pocono creeks, which are all high gradient. And one of the sites that that's actually when I had to duck out just a moment ago. Sorry, that isn't Spence, this is Blakeslee. The other one, I got the wrong thing. The other one was Spence, that's Blakeslee. Sorry about that. When I ducked out for a moment is actually another grant that's going towards Blakeslee Farm. And this is the downstream side of it, downstream side of it, which is miserable. It's like, it is the part that they used to have the cows in the creek. it was a dairy farm. That's no longer the case, but it does have an ag easement on it, so there still has to be some agricultural uses. The upstream part of it is fairly nice, but this is one where basically TNCPA has got money and is beginning during the restoration work along this section. And so we have basically stations that are downstream of this. And so if you look kind of what's happening with this is we've got, as we go along this creek, and again it's flowing this way, you've got these different stations that are going in and hopefully getting information on the impacts and the changes that are taking place. And so they're changing the land uses at the old golf courses. At this one, they're changing the land uses at 2 old farms, both the Spence property and Blakeslee Farm. And then hopefully we'll be able to see what's happening, what's changing over time. And it's a great resource for students because it is, like I said, 10 minutes away from campus, very easy to use for student classes. It's very easy to use for student research projects, and the Mayfly stations are a pretty big part of that. And this is actually Broadhead Creek. So I will leave I have other pictures and stuff if you have questions, but that gives you just kind of a quick synopsis of the stuff that we're doing right now. Since I'm about 6 minutes, I will stop it there. All right. I can be all senior too. All right. So does anybody have any questions about that? Yes. 2 other things actually just to tie into for later, if folks are interested, is that 2 things we're working on. One is a backup river stream gauge. Folks have I've lost a number of them to ice. We just had actually a tree drop on one of them. My sensor pod is fine, but I'm going to have to roll the tree off of it. Those things go. The sensors are staying, but the river gauges are useless. And so basically what we've done is we've driven a piece of bar into the bottom with an orange painted top, and essentially I'm setting a meter stick on top of it. And that's using something so that if the problem before is that we did have a situation when the sensor pod got pulled out and the river gauge went out. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, now we got nothing. So all that historical data isn't much useful. So I can talk about that. Yeah.
You felt like, have you written that up alone?
I haven't. I just wanted to see if there's anything. Yeah.
It would be a nice thing just to write up, a page or something.
Yeah.
Some pictures and you just try to sort of,
So something beyond painted sticks stuffed in brown, something beyond that. Got it. Okay. Check. Yeah, I'll make it sound more sophisticated. I will. No, that sounds good. And the other thing that we want to talk about, again, is I tend to think in long terms as far as the organization goes. And so my plan this coming summer is I'll be going to a Leon meeting, which is the Global Lakes Ecological Observatory Network, which again is a grassroots network working with sensor stations, well, maybe a little more sophisticated than what we've got, but on lake systems, on standing water systems. And they started out pretty much as a group like this. And so trying to work with them of how do we go beyond when maybe Stroud isn't as integral to it, what happens in the next 10 years and where do we go from there? So that's something, again, maybe for future nuggets for discussion, I guess. All right, good?
Good.
All right.
Very good. Okay, so we are right at noon, right on track. We had 5 presentations lined up. So why don't we just have lunch? I mean, it can be a working lunch, or folks can sort of go roaming about or eat out on the deck here or whatever. But regardless, let's try to be back here and ready to go in half an hour. That sounds all right.
We have nibblies over there, and there'll be juice, tea, water, whatever. Beers for me.
Yeah, no, I saw his face, but I thought it was next.
I did too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Who's on here? David M. Sorry. You want yours up? Oh. Thank you.
I just want to see it later.